built home is a great example of the Mediterranean Revival architectural period. And with grand features like this staircase and these high ceilings and archways, all of the details in here were designed to make a statement.
Welcome to the Deering Estate. We celebrate the 100th anniversary of the stone house this year. With Mediterranean Revival style construction, everything is grand. It's one of the elements that really stays true to the original forms of architecture that it draws on from just old Roman architecture.
We travel back in time as we tour one of South Florida's oldest properties, the Grand Deering Estate, on today's SoFlo Home Project. Welcome to SoFlo Home Project. I'm Alena Capra. So we are so excited to be touring the fabulous Deering Estate during their centennial celebration. And this behind me is actually the stone house, which was once the summer home of Charles Deering. The Deering Estate is a 444-acre environmental, archaeological, and historical preserve. There are several buildings on this property. Construction of the stone house began in 1922. It took 11 months to build and was completed in early 1923. So we're here today at the beautiful Deering Estate, joined by Tamara McDonald, the Associate Curator here at Deering Estate. Tamara, welcome to SoFlo Home Project.
Thank you for having me.
So what I think is so cool about design and construction of homes is that you could look back to certain periods of time and then see how they influence today's construction.
Yes, I think you see echoes of this style throughout new architecture. Things like the stone carvings, the custom tile, those red tiled roofs. Those are elements you see on a lot of houses today. Elements like those are timeless. So the secret to the stone house is Phineas Paste. He was what was called the supervisor of color. He'd learned from the likes of George Merrick, kind of what that look for Miami should be. And it's something that you see that echoes throughout the Biscayne Bay coastline, and basically oversaw this design that was so painstakingly done. The coloring of the house was something of his hallmark. It was a watercolor styled finish that really pulled on the traditional colors of Mediterranean homes, the yellows, the blues, the reds.
If you bring it all the way from then to today, the color is still beautiful and I think almost timeless. The material used on this, is this limestone?
It is actually limestone. It is the stone house because of the stone facade that you see on the outside of the structure. The house itself, though, is made out of poured concrete to fireproof it.
So let's talk about the architectural style of the home.
So one of the things that surprises most people is that this house was actually completed in just 11 months.
Wow.
1922 is the signature year, but it's a style that is developed over time. Mediterranean Revival architecture combines elements of old world architecture into what was in the 1920s a very popular new trend. It was the idea of creating estates that were like palaces in the Mediterranean.
Now we've got some features, some beautiful architectural features like the doors and of course the columns and the windows.
So the main entrance doors are actually replica doors for what would have been the Deering's Spanish estate, Maricel. They are what would have been in those times a defensive mechanism for a castle. But for us, they are just beautiful, amazing doors.
So it's not just for the beauty, but of course for function, as we always see in home design and construction, and this home being no different.
So one of the things that really intrigued me about the house to begin with were the carved stone details. It is a hallmark element of this style of architecture. It's almost like you end up with a story of the natural surroundings of this place.
I think it just allows you to almost transport yourself back into that time period.
Definitely, I think the stone house is a little bit of a time machine. You walk through those doors and it takes you back into a whole other world, a whole other time.
definitely evoking the nostalgia of that time. And it's so great that we have this right here in our backyard in South Florida. And we're gonna bring everyone on in to check out the interior of the stone house when we come back. Coming up, we take you to the ball and some other fabulous spaces on SoFlo Home Project.
So if you're thinking about changing out your roof, we're going to give you some tips on how to get the most out of your consultation on today's SoFlo Home Project.
Welcome back to SoFlo Home Project. I'm Alena Capra, and we are here with Tamara McDonald, the Associate Curator at Deering Estate. So we have now walked inside the stone house, Tamara, and so we talked a little bit about the exterior, and now we're in the ballroom, as it's called?
That is actually not the name of the space. People remember it being called the ballroom for several years. It is actually the Grand Hall, and it is the seat of what would have been that extensive collection of art the Deerings brought here in the 1920s. So imagine this space not as a ballroom, but as an art gallery, which is what it was created to be.
Because we've got high ceilings in here, beautiful coffered ceiling. Share with us some of the details about that and the architecture and how it relates to that time frame.
So you have some very distinctive features here. The ceiling itself is what most people would call a coffered ceiling. It is actually a poured concrete coffered ceiling with embellished details that really highlight the marine life of the Biscayne Bay. And your floor is just as dazzling. It is a concrete stamp of black and white.
It's striking and grand all at the same time.
Very striking.
And this checkerboard effect with tile these days is still being done. So I love that this is something that truly is timeless.
There are definitely elements that, even for Charles Deering's time, were a little bit ahead of the curve.
You are standing in front of a beautiful fireplace, and I can't imagine a home like this not having some grand fireplaces such as this.
There are several fireplaces throughout the home. This one is one of my favorites. It is a marble mantle that was actually gifted to Charles by his brother James, and it dates to the 16th century. These fireplaces, although there are several, were never actually used.
For the look.
Yeah,
Simply
they
for
were
the look.
really just for that element of architecture. It was something that you would have had in Mediterranean-style homes, but Charles's concern about a fire kind of overtaking the collection and destroying it all really meant that fire was not an option. Even in a fireplace.
Well, I totally understanding of that. There are some other things here done to prevent fire in the home, and we are going to share those with our viewers. But first, let's check in with our friends at FHIA and see what they have going on today.
I was recently talking to a friend, and he found out we do roofing, and he was asking a lot of questions. And so they asked me, like, how can I know what's the best way for me to definitely know that what I'm being told is accurate. And it sounds simple, but one of the things I suggested to them is, you know, how much time are you spending with that contractor while they're there? Are you just sitting in your living room and saying, yeah, my roof's up there, go ahead and let me know what you think? Or are you taking that opportunity to go up on that roof with the roofing contractor to really see, do you need a new roof? And then if we decide that a roof is necessary, why? It's really important from the start to be part of that process and really try to evaluate it with them to first determine if it needs done, and second, if it needs done, why it needs done, and what are some of the best solutions so that you don't have those problems in the future. So when I suggested getting on the roof with your contractor, my friend actually kind of laughed and said, well, my contractor didn't get on the roof. He said that he had satellite imaging, which showed him my roof and also gave him the measurements of my roof, so there was no need for him to get on the roof. You know, we all have access to that imagery, and it'll show you kind of an idea of what the roof looks like. But being up on the roof, and from experiences of being on roofs, there's sometimes, depending on where that picture is taken from, where you don't always see some problem areas. If they're showing you initially as a contractor that they're pretty lazy and they're not willing to do that work, you know, what do you think it's going to look like if you gave them the opportunity to do that project? You think all of a sudden they're going to get really conscientious and be really thorough? More than likely you're going to have a contractor that's also going to shortcut things on the installation side, and you're not going to be happy with that experience. So pay attention to those things because they're really important, and it's something that starts with the initial consultation.
Wow, so this is the library. This was Charles Deering's more of an office space, or was this actually like a library used?
This was actually a library for a very avid reader. Charles had what was said to be the second largest personal library in the country in the 1920s.
Wow, it's a really great space, and I love this sort of navy blue color on the walls. Earlier, we had talked about the fireplace and how Mr. Deering didn't necessarily light the fireplaces, but they were here, which we have another beautiful one right here. But there are some other special things they did to prevent fires in this home. What were some of those things?
Yes, things like the copper-clad doors that are an element added to the traditional structure of the home for wood doors that fireproof the interior spaces.
Which are also beautiful.
Yes.
So we're going back to beauty and function.
Beauty and
everything
function.
here.
Everything goes together. It's a puzzle box of features. You pair the copper-clad doors with brass-plated windows and the resiliency of the concrete structure itself. And you can isolate each room and the artwork that it would have contained and protect it from fire.
We have also sort of a coppered ceiling, or beams here, more beams. What would we call this ceiling treatment?
So traditionally in a Mediterranean style home, you would have wood beams for your ceilings. So what you see here are actually poured concrete beams.
So a lot of poured concrete details in here. And during that time, was there a reason poured concrete was used as opposed to other materials?
So poured concrete was actually something that was a little cutting edge in the 1920s. It definitely was a way of building structures faster. Poured concrete with molds and casts really let someone do the impossible, which is what happens with the stone house. You build 3 floors with a basement in just 11 months.
And of course, that brings in the details. It's cozy and inviting, yet grand at the same time.
It is the signature for every space. Grand details, but a function about every space. These are a 1922
Original to the home.
For the home, and they are much more of a minimalist style.
Yes.
You see a lot more of the geometric patterns. I think a little bit more streamlined, mostly because of the quick construction that you would have had for the stone house.
I mean, you said 11 months. I'm thinking something this grand without the technology that we have today is so impressive to think about. That's a great fact about this. And I love that we're sharing all these details about the space. And we've got so much more to see. So we are going to continue touring through the stone house and sharing more about this beautiful and historic property when we come back. Coming up next, we look at more grand spaces and one of the first home elevators in South Florida on SoFlo Home Project. Welcome back to SoFlo Home Project. I'm Alena Capra, and we're here with Tamara McDonald, the Associate Curator at Deering Estate. Tamara, we've seen behind us the library, we've seen the grand hall, some of the exterior, but right now, this is like, I feel like the main hub of the house because you've got a way to go upstairs and upstairs with the elevator.
You can go 2 ways. The grand staircase, the Otis elevator, either one will take you to what we call the residence.
Now, what's interesting is in a residential home, back when this was built in the 1920s, elevators were not something that was necessarily used.
Right. For Charles Deering, the Otis installation was a necessity. He was in and out of a wheelchair in his time here, so it was just a convenient element that he needed to be able to navigate the up and down stairs.
So it looks like we've got 2 doors, a gate and a door to make this work.
The doors have to be closed for the elevator to function properly. You can pull them both open and lock them in place so that you can enter and exit.
And it's quite spacious for a residential elevator.
It even has tile in the flooring.
Brings the design
so
in.
it brings
Look at
all
that.
of the design into what is a functional piece again. So,
I love that. So this is original.
yes.
So now we've got a grand staircase, of course. This is truly grand. It's very wide. But my question is, so this is a little bit less opulent than some of the architectural details.
So to have a grand staircase in any home in the 1920s was just essential. It was an element of design that was a carryover from all the forms that came before it. This and many of the more minimalist designs that you see really is a byproduct, again, of just that speedy construction that you would have had for the Deerings in the 1920s. This is a set of stairs that is cast concrete as well.
So everything in the stone house in terms of the entryways feels so grand. So not just the staircase behind me, but as you look at the grand hall, the hallway.
It is definitely a hallmark element of the style of architecture. Mediterranean revival homes. It's essential to have these grand archways, these long kind of dramatic staircases.
Absolutely. And in a lot of homes we see modeled after this type of style to this day reflect some of these ceiling details and archways in the architecture. It's nice to see where it comes from.
Yes, definitely.
Now we've got a lot more to see. When we come back, we're going to check out more of the stone house here at Deering Estate. Next, we head to the second level, where we find 2 primary bedrooms on SoFlo Home Project. Welcome back to SoFlo Home Project. I'm Alena Capra, and we are here with Tamara McDonald, the Associate Curator at Deering Estate. Tamara, so now we are in Mr. Deering's bedroom. Yes. And what's interesting is, so Mr. Deering and Mrs. Deering both had separate sleeping quarters, separate bathrooms, suites with the bedroom.
They have a his and hers split on the second floor.
Now, in homes of this size during that time period, would this be a typical arrangement for the bedrooms to be separate?
It is. It was definitely a typical setup, especially with the idea that most of the constructions for this style home were with the idea of creating just elaborate kind of palatial homes, and the more space, the better.
And now we've looked at some of the details in this room that I just want to point out. Again, the beams on the ceiling, but not real wood?
Not real wood. Again, concrete, but you also see the echo of the coloring for the home here as well, with the blue in the ceiling.
This is a very pretty color too.
This blue in particular is one that I feel ties everything together. You see it echoed in the tile work here in Mrs. Deering's bedroom, as well as a special piece that she selects in her bedroom, her headboard.
So this is really nice. Back when this house was built, was the plumbing something that was not in every home the way it is in this home?
So it is definitely an element that was a little bit ahead of the curve. In the 1920s and 30s, indoor plumbing was really just hitting its high point. So to have this amount of interior plumbing work done then was pretty spectacular. It creates spaces for these bathrooms that were very dramatic.
I'm seeing this and it looks like a wicker chair, but I see a little bit of it's a wheelchair here.
This is the wheelchair. It is a functional wheelchair that he used. It's one of the hallmarks of the collection's original furnishings for wicker pieces.
Wow, and then the color again ties in with everything here. So it's very decorative in nature as well. Now, we've also got balconies. And right out here is a beautiful balcony.
So you have 2 distinct spaces. You have what we call a sleeping porch attached to Charles's bedroom here, and you have a loggia, which is attached to Mrs. Deering's bedroom on the other side. They do connect with that larger porch space for Mrs. Deering's room, but how you use them would be a little bit different. You literally have a sleeping porch to take a nap on when it's a little too hot to be indoors. But the loggia was really created as a lounging space. And this Valentine's Day will be one of the rare opportunities that people can actually reserve space on the balcony areas and really take in that Biscayne Bay view that really kind of got Charles and Marion here to stay.
Wow, well, it's a gorgeous place, and of course, such rich history here. And
yes.
So much to see, and thank you for spending some time with us and sharing a little bit more about the Stone House and, of course, Deering Estate.
Thank you for having me.
And now let's take a look at what design inspiration we have planned for you next week on SoFlo Home Project. Next week on SoFlo Home Project, we work on DIY craft projects for Valentine's Day. Get ready to bring some cheer and a little love to your home and your loved ones. And before we go, let's check in with Hunter Frankie, the host of SoFlo Health, and see what he's up to tomorrow. Hunter, what is going on?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call you back. Alena Capra needs something. Hey there, Alena. This week on SoFlo Health, it's breaking news because it's been cold here in South Florida. Now, by the time that we see this, it might not be as cold, but we want to educate you on how the cool weather affects your health. Plus, Professor Produce is in, and he's going to talk to you all about bananas. Some might say he's nuts about bananas. Then we meet a local gym owner who shows us that CrossFit can be accessible to anyone at any age. And finally, we head over to one of the first vegan restaurants in Miami Beach. It's all right here tomorrow on SoFlo Health at 12:30 p.m. on the one and only Local 10.
That sounds great. We will definitely be watching. And to our viewers at home, thank you so much for joining us this week. And we hope to see you again next week for another episode of SoFlo Home Project right here on Local 10. And remember, there's no place like SoFlo Home. If you missed any part of this episode, or if you're looking for more design inspiration, make sure to check out all episodes online at SoFloShows.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram.